he is the co-founder. He's a co-founder of the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, one of the oldest professional bodies in the field. He's an author or co-author of more than 70 books, including the seminal Coaching the team at work. I have actually personally read some of Dr. David books in mentoring and coaching as well. Today is about team coaching with the PERILL model. Team coaching is the fastest growing area of coaching. It enables coaches to deliver much greater impact on clients and their organizations. By taking a systematic perspective, helping us understand the dynamics of the team and its environment. Dr. David will explore the reasons behind this explosive growth and present current research relating to team coaching from a complex adaptive systems perspective. So welcome, Dr. David.
Hello there. I'm hoping that you can see my screen now.
Yeah, we can see it, but we need it to be a little bit bigger because it's
Okay.
very small now.
Okay, let's swap displays. And with a bit of luck, that should be right.
Yes. Now it's wonderful.
There we go. Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you all. And I'm going to go straight into the topic, if I may. So team coaching is growing fast. It's the biggest area, fastest growing area of coaching at the moment. And it has a lot of value for both coaches and our clients. It's one of the ways that we keep ahead of things. I noticed that there's a new study being done, which by Nikki Terablanche in South Africa, to try and create an AI coach that will use the GROW model. And already we've got, it's not that difficult because there's already lots of prototypes of this. But one of the big issues for coaches is that basically GROW model coaching is dead from a point of view as a professional level. Firstly, it's one of the things that we grow out of very quickly if we're competent as a coach. And secondly, it's something that as you become more effective as a coach, you realize it just doesn't work for more complicated things. In fact, even Sir John Whitmore, who promoted the GROW model, said before he died that he wished he hadn't done so, that the G should really have been V for vision. So what we're seeing is that coaches need to up their game. They need to be able to offer a lot more. And that means we have to think systemically and to deliver systemic results rather than simple linear thinking that comes from rather basic childlike models like the GROW model. So we sometimes say that GROW stands for get rich on waffle, but that's perhaps very unkind. But for organizations, team coaches, organizations just need more and more teamwork. The old idea that somebody would sit at the center of the team and direct everybody else what to do just doesn't work in a complex environment. And companies that operate in that style are going bust very quickly because you cannot respond fast enough to the changing world around you. We also know that in any organization, you look at high performing individuals and you put them all together and they don't make high performing teams. It's teamwork that makes high performing teams, and teams of lesser performers individually who come together as a team, a real team, typically outperform those people, a bunch of individual high performers who don't operate together. So if we think about the coaching that we do with our individual clients one-to-one, increasingly it's obvious that trying to help them to say that I want to improve my skills in X or Y, I want to run better meetings. You can only do that by engaging with the system around you, the team of people who report to you, your boss, and a whole variety of things. So the system is what drives. The client is no longer the individual. The client is the individual within their system. And very often, increasingly, that system is more and more the team within its system as well. And so the faster things change, the more that we have to to focus on teams. And so focusing on the individual, in a survey that we did, over 80% of HR professionals, senior line managers, and coaches said that focusing on the individual is part of the problem, not part of the solution. We have to find ways of rewarding and recognizing and developing teams rather than individuals in the future. You've all been into organizations, I'm sure, where somebody has said that they are they tell, look, this is the top team, but they don't behave like a team. They're just a bunch of individuals, or group, if you like. And we've seen the changes in the way that leadership operates. So talk a little bit about that later. But leaders basically aren't the same as they were. The kind of leadership that we saw 20, 30 years ago doesn't work in a modern, complex environment. And so what we have to be doing is adapting and constantly changing at individual level, team level, function level, organization level, and also at societal level. Everything is about constant change. So what we do with team coaching, we take things a little bit further, a lot further, in fact. Think about the complexity of having a conversation with a one-to-one with a client. Now bring into it a third person, maybe the client's boss. You've suddenly doubled the complexity of that system. Every further person you bring into that system is an increase in complexity. Now, it's not exactly a doubling, because when you can see patterns in the complexity, you can simplify it to a certain extent. But typically in a team of 8 or so people, which is about the optimum size, you would find that the level of complexity is about 15 to 20 times more than in the one-to-one relationship. Now, that means that we've got to be far more skilled, far more capable of working with uncertainty than we ever were before. So what team coaching does is to help the team future-proof itself, develop the clarity of how it's evolving and how its environment is evolving, so that it can slip in between the waves and the gaps in what's happening. Helping it to understand how it works, the systems within, the systems without, and the systems that cross the boundary between the team and the outside world. And ultimately, the objective of all team coaching is to make ourselves as team coaches obsolete. We enable the team to coach itself. And I think for me, the Nanny McPhee moment, those of you who's with small children will know what I mean by that. When the team says, when you're able to say to the team, when you need me, but don't want me, I'm here. When you want me, but don't need me, I'm gone. And I think that's very much the role of a team coach. Team coaching is not any of these other things. It's not coaching the team members individually, although you might do that as well. It's not having a strategy away day, although you might include some team coaching in a strategy away day. It is certainly not team building. Team building has a terrible track record of success, largely because teams keep changing. There's always people coming into the teams and leaving teams, but also because team building tries to build a degree of trust and camaraderie in a team, which means that those people who come in later haven't been exposed to it. And so typical team building actually ends up with teams becoming less and less functional as the membership changes. And team facilitation, when it's done well, is brilliant, but it addresses a specific issue. We've got a problem. Can you help us to work through this particular issue? It's not about increasing the capability of the team. It's about solving a particular problem. It's about a fix. And that's fine. But when we're looking to the longer term and the continued evolution and growth of a team, we want the team to be able to fix itself. It's the old issue of give a man a fish and they'll feed himself for a day. Give them a fishing rod and they can feed themselves for much longer. We're into the fishing rod business in that context. And so looking at the whole picture, we're seeing that team coaching has really been taken seriously by the three major organizations in coaching, by ICF, EMCC, and also belatedly the AC as well. EMCC was the first to produce team coaching standards. ICF has recently produced team coaching competencies. The difference between the two is that the team coaching standards were designed based starting with team coaching and working back towards one-to-one coaching. The team coaching competencies were largely based upon saying what do we need to add on to our one-to-one competencies to be able to work with teams as well. Doesn't really matter. The point is that we're now starting to see some clarity around how do we work with teams and what do we need to make that enormous jump from coaching one-to-one to coaching with teams. And indeed, one of the things we would say, well, I'll come to that in a little while because it's on the next slide, another slide. Let's just look for a moment at coaching generally. Coaching and mentoring are two kinds of conversation that help people understand their internal context first. So what's going on for me? Who am I? What are my aspirations, my fears, my hopes and desires, my strengths and my weaknesses, to really understand your internal world. But they also help you to understand the external world. Who are my champions and what is evolving and happening in the world outside of me? Now, and what coaching and mentoring do is to help us have the conversation that links that understanding of our internal world, that clarity of there, with clarity around the external world, so we make better decisions. And the big distinction between coaches and mentors is not this stuff that keeps being put around that one's more directive than the other. There's no difference in directiveness between coaches and mentors. That's simply fake news that has been around for a long time. In fact, the history of mentoring is far more associated with non-directive behaviors than coaching, which only became mostly non-directive in general in the literature at the end of the last century. So what we actually see here is the difference is that mentors have experience they bring. And the mentor's experience enables them to ask better questions, and also to offer context. Now, context is very different from advice. Context is information that helps the other person with the clarity of their thinking, information that they don't have. If you give somebody context, you really enable them to come to better conclusions. If you give them advice, you're doing the thinking for them. And it's that confusion between advice and context, which has led to some of the misunderstandings about coaching and mentoring. In our current research around mature coaches, what we're finding is the most mature coaches blend mentoring and coaching together. They use their skills as a coach and their experience as a human being to integrate and to be able to support someone in a much, much more powerful way. So becoming a mentor in the true sense of the word is actually the part of the evolution into a really mature coach. So why do I say all this? It's because the same thing applies in individual coaching as to team coaching. We're also trying to help the team understand its internal world and its external world so it can make better decisions and thrive, therefore. So if you want to become a team coach, the starting point is basically learning how to support a team leader in the conversations that they need to have with their team. So we start off coaching the person on their own issues. Quickly, we get to realize, or they get to realize, that their team is an integral part of their ability to change anything, and particularly changing their own behavior. If the team supports them in changing their behavior, it's more likely to happen. If their boss supports them in changing that behavior, it's more likely to happen. So looking at the system, we move from coaching them one-to-one to coaching them about how they create the coaching culture in their team, to eventually coaching the team as a whole with the team leader in it. And that's a major progression for people. And now we also can say, let's just define, what do we mean by team coaching? So here's my favorite definition. It's a learning intervention, so everybody's learning, designed to increase collective capability. So it's not about individual performance, although that comes into it. It's about collective capability and performance of a group or a team through application of the coaching principles of assisted reflection, analysis, and motivation for change. So what we're doing is creating an environment where teams can reflect and review and understand themselves and their world so they can operate more effectively and in a more agile way there. And when we look at the nature of 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 coaching individuals versus teams, we find, of course, things people will say things to you one to one, they wouldn't say in a group. So there's a confidentiality issue here. There's an issue about the pace of thinking. I'm going to come back to that in a second. The kind of topic we would deal with in team coaching is issues that are relevant to everybody, rather than just one or two. There's a difference around the levels of trust in a team. You can build trust quite quickly with a client, but how do you build trust with the whole team? And how do you help them build trust with each other? That's much more complex. And all that conflict, the hidden conflict in teams, particularly, there may be, when you're dealing with a client, you may have some conflict in yourself about what you say and what you don't say, or what questions you ask. They may have some internal conflict. There might be a little bit of conflict between the two of you. And they might bring to you conflict that they have with other people outside of the coaching relationship. That's complicated enough. But you think of a team. If it's got 8 people in it, it's got 56 different potential conflict relationships. And sometimes we've seen, if you add to that plus that subgroups within the team, we've seen teams with 60 or more potential conflict scenarios. The complexity is so much greater. But let's look at the pace of thinking and deciding. You're in a team, you're coaching them, you're helping them to think about a complex issue, and half of them are decided, right, we've got the answer, this is what we're going to do. And half of them are saying, I don't know about that. We really need to give this some deeper thought. If you go with the ones that are really ready to go, gung-ho to move on, you're going to alienate the others who are then going to have to remake the conversation later. If you go with the people who are still needing to think about it, you've now created a situation where the others are just going to be taking out their mobile phones and checking their emails. They'll have switched off. What you need is a tool bag of ways of keeping both sides engaged. And that's what team coach training does to help people get this big toolkit. So the simple mechanism that I use frequently in those situations, for example, is I'll take all the people who are ready to move ahead, and I'll send them off to another room to think about all the things that could go wrong. And when we put the people who are left behind now feel relieved from all the pressure of the others, and they're able to take new ideas on much more clearly. You bring them back together again after half an hour, and they have become a different team. I think it's such clarity around, you can build such collegiality by recognizing the different pace of learning. So these are just some of the things that we do in teams. So moving along just slightly here. So if we talk about performance, it's one of those words which is heavily overused. When we talk about performance, do we mean individual performance? Do we mean collective performance? Who defines that performance? Over what time period? If we define it over a year, people are very good, and teams are very good about fudging the results. So this year looks good, especially if they know that they're going to be rewarded on this year. But if it's next year, oops, let's go back one. Sorry. But at the impact of next year, we've seen organizations where this focus on performance today, on results today, has had a vast negative impact on their future prospects. It's killed organizations very easily. And the strength of the link with organizational purpose, it's great to perform and deliver stuff, but has it any value? We did a study 30 years or so ago about the roles of internal communications functions and how they judge their performance. And it was all about, in their eyes, about how many awards they got for having a wonderful employee magazine and so forth. But then what the results of our research showed was that had a marginal impact, less than 1%, on the performance of the business. The one thing that accounted for more than 2/3 of the performance, the impact on performance that the internal communications function did, was how they supported the conversations between the leaders of the organization and the employees of the organization. Everything else was marginal. So the ways that they judged performance were basically irrelevant rather. Then we look at these three words: performance, capability, and capacity. Again, overused. Um, what we see is performance is about what we do now or in the near future. Can we hit our results for this 6 months? Capability is what about the future? How are we going to build the capacity, the capability, the ability in the team to deliver not just this year, but next year and the year after? How are we building for the future? And capacity is about how do we do more with less and less resources? Um, and so these are the three things that all teams need to focus on for the future. And then looking a little bit ahead. So wonderful academic Richard Hackman found 6 basic things that for high performing teams. They had to be a real team. You knew who was in it, not and who was not. A compelling direction, what we would call purpose. Having the right people, people with the right skills and competencies, and the ability to work together. A clear team structure. So not too big. All of the data that we have tells us that once a team gets above 8 people, it starts to lose quite a lot in terms of its effectiveness. And interestingly, anthropology tells us that that number 8 relates to our evolution on the savannah, when 7 other people was the maximum you could see when you and be aware of where they were positioned when you're playing, when you're hunting game. The organizational context, really important. Does the organization support and want the team to succeed? And you can see, Richard found that competent team coaching, having a coaching mindset, was also an important part of the whole package. And this wonderful gentleman is Mr. Champoux. I had no idea there was somebody called Mr. Champoux, but it's nice to know that there was. And what he found was that similar kinds of things, the trust, respect, again, we're back to common purpose, knowing what you're there for. Every major study we've seen says the team being really clear about why it's there is a starting point for all change and effectiveness. Can they manage conflict? Are they results focused? And do they align authority and accountability? So do people know what they're responsible for? And do they have the resources to make those things happen? And then in a study that I did in one of the world's largest high technology companies, I was lucky enough, they gave me their highest performing teams around the world to go and investigate. And the team and I, we did focus groups with a large number of teams trying to identify their common characteristics. Now, whenever you do a study like this, there is always a warning to be about the results. And that is that just because every team that we found, high performing team, exhibited these results, it doesn't mean to say these are precursors of high performance. These might be the characteristics, the symptoms of high performance. So you have to be high performing in order to exhibit these things, rather than you have to exhibit these things to become high performing. Now, there's a circular argument here. And by and large, from common sense point of view, all of these things are factors which teams, if you aim for, should help a team become more effective. But having the right people, really spending the time to make sure that they fit, focusing on success and when people make mistakes, actually being okay about it. Say this is an experiment, building experimentation and failure into the process, using people's strengths, giving people tasks that they have the maximum energy for, trusting and respecting comes in every time, having a positive attitude to change, welcoming change rather than resisting it, clear goals or clear sense of where you're going. This is back to purpose. Fizz and buzz. Fizz is the enjoyment you get from the work you do, and buzz is the enjoyment you get from the people around you, the social environment. And having a secure leader, and I'll say something a little bit more about that later, but these are the factors that we found in these highest performing teams. Now, this applies to one company, of course. We've not done this in hundreds of companies, but it does seem to echo in most organizations. And then another major study we did looked at the literature on on linear thinking and systemic thinking, and all those things on the left are things that happen with systemic thinking. I did this study 13 or 14 years ago, excuse me, where I went around the world interviewing senior HR people and chief executives, directors of companies around the world, asking them the question: if all the stuff that HR does in talent management and in succession planning actually works, how come the wrong people so often get to the top? And the answer was because it doesn't work. And it doesn't work, most of the stuff that we have, because it's linear thinking. It's all about fixing the problem, controlling things, finding nice, neatly packaged solutions, having nice, predictable outcomes, and so forth, seeking certainty. Whereas in a VUCA world, things are completely different. We can't fix a problem forever because a new one's going to come up. It's like whack-a-mole. Whatever problem you fix today is going to come up somewhere else. And so you basically understand the patterns, the context, so that you can make more rapid decisions. You're enabling and empowering rather than controlling. And you're living with uncertainty rather than trying to create a false sense of certainty. All of these things, the emergence, the giving up the need to be right, giving up the need to know what's happening next year, being able to live with an evolving world. This is the key for success in organizations and teams in the future. And so what we did was based upon this understanding of linear thinking and systemic thinking, we did a major study of the literature of what actually makes a team perform. What are the factors within team performance? And what we wanted to do here was find the relationship ultimately between systemic thinking and systemic approaches and performance factors. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of things here, most of which are pretty obvious. Psychological safety comes up in most studies in one form or another as a key constituent of high-performing teams. How you work together, the collaborative processes, the diversity, fascinating one, that having a load of people from completely different backgrounds, on the one hand can lead complete chaos in teams, but if it's managed well, can lead to highly creative, highly productive teams. It depends upon the norms and the way that you manage and use and value that diversity. And so out of all that, we were able to refine it once more until we actually came up with 6 critical elements that interacted with each other to drive performance or dysfunction in teams from every example that we've been able to find, to explore. And we've tried this with many teams, and many team coaches now use this model across the world. And essentially, it has 5 pillars and a foundation. Now, I'm going to go through the pillars first. The first one is about purpose and motivation. And what we're really saying here is, why is the team here? Who wants it to succeed? What's the point of this team? And when we define the purpose, does it energize us? Are we motivated to make it happen? And then the second element here is all the external processes and systems. So how do we relate to our stakeholders? Do they care if we succeed? Do they actually know what we stand for, what we're trying to do on their behalf? Do they feel that we listen to them? Then you've got the relationships inside the team. So do people trust each other? Is there psychological safety? Are people able to say what they think rather than what they feel they are expected to say? And then the internal processes. How do we make decisions here? Most teams can't describe how they make decisions. We just have a discussion and we make a vote. That's not a decision-making process. That's close to anarchy. The processes by which we allocate work and do the work, so the process flow, the work flow, the quality systems that we have, these are all part of the internal process and systems, how we communicate with each other. And then the learning processes. How do we continuously learn so that we are adapting to our environment around us? Do we have, for example, a team learning or team development plan? We might have a business plan and a personal development plans, but what about the team development plan that links all of these into a learning cascade? And then leadership. Well, leadership is fascinating. The idea of leaders as being somebody in control who knows everything and it makes all the decisions, that idea has been dead a long time ago. It hasn't been fully buried yet. Um, it just refuses to actually admit that it's dead. And what we're increasingly finding is that leadership in the 21st century is distributed leadership. Leaders do a number of things that actually support the team, that enable the people in the team to take decisions and to take responsibility and to take authority. So the leader can concentrate on the things that are most important instead of doing everybody else's job for them. And one of the things that we did a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now, we started to look around the literature and say, so what does the academic literature tell us about the functions of leaders? What do leaders actually do? And to our surprise, we could find thousands of books and articles that talked about the qualities of leadership, but almost nothing about what leaders actually did that affected the performance of the team. And eventually we found one article, a well-researched macro article with 15 items of things that a leader did. And we took these around to teams and leaders and said, well, okay, how many of these actually have to be done by the leader and how many of them could be distributed amongst the team? And we found that only 2 were actually reserved for the leader. Only the leader could do them. One of those was to get resources from above, to have sign-off from above for money, people, and so forth. So negotiating with the higher levels in the hierarchy. The other was protecting the team from interference from outside so it could get on with its job. Everything else, from appraisals through to bonuses to you name it, everything else could, to some extent, be shared in responsibility with the rest of the team. Now, that's pretty far away from our normal command and control, hub and spoke type of leader, who's basically obsolete in today's environment. Even in the military forces, we're seeing that distribution of leadership. There's a chain of command, but nonetheless, it's much more flexible. People get much more opportunity to show initiative and take ownership for tasks. So if we put all this together into a matrix, it looks a little like this. So the LQB down the middle in the yellow stands for leadership qualities and behaviors. And all the green items relate to when the team is functioning really well. And the red items for when it's not. And so if you like, when it's in a green, this is this particular aspect of the team's functioning is doing well. When it's in the red, it's not. And if you think about what happens when the team is in a situation where it's got things are going badly, things are it's not delivering what it should. I think I've jumped 2 there. It's just, yeah. Let me just go back. Oh no, okay, it's in the wrong order. All right, doesn't matter. So here we are with when it's all working as it really should. So you can see you've got good processes externally with your external stakeholders. So you've got strong collaborative relationships with them, and they have good relationships with you and your team. You respond much more quickly, more effectively to any quality issues that come up. And you're able, because they tell you about their thinking and their plans, you're able to get much faster product innovation. That's just taking one line where everything's working well. But let's take another picture where things are not going so well. So here we are. So here we've got, you've got poor internal processes and/or poor relationships. Look at all the things that are going on here. People don't interfere in each other's territory. People don't talk about the elephants in the room. Everything here just needs one of these elements, one of these pillars, to be not working properly, and it comes out with a red outcome, with a dysfunction. Whereas when everything works well, you need 2 greens. So what we've got here is a complex interplay between multiple aspects, and leadership basically acts as the intermediary who takes responsibility and ownership for managing the processes and each of these elements. And these are just examples, by the way. They're not the only things you can put in these boxes. And the way we'd normally use this, either with a questionnaire or get the team to use real examples of what's gone well and what's not gone so well, and actually look at what was happening in each of these intersections, what was working well and what was not working well. And slowly you get this picture of the two together. So how do we actually work with the team, or how do we actually begin to see patterns? And if you've got 3 or 4 examples, you see very quickly that because we didn't actually listen to our stakeholders, that actually caused dissension and distrust in our team. I mean, a classic example, we get asked to can you help build trust in this team? And as a facilitator, we would say yes, or a team builder, we say yes, we'll do some team building exercises. But as a coach, you come in and say, so if we assume this lack of trust is not the issue itself, it's a symptom of things going wrong between different parts of the system, then what are the patterns we can identify? Which bits of the system? Maybe we've got a leader who actually likes to manage by divide and rule. Maybe we've got people who come with different from different parts of a merged company who have different ideas about how things should best be done. All sorts of things. We typically find that any presented issue has at least 3 contributing other factors of the model here. And so it gives us a framework for working and understanding things. And just to sort of round up a little bit on some of these things. So when purpose and motivation, do we all share the same narrative about the future? If we don't, how can we create that narrative? And that's what team coaches help you to do. Where do we get our energy from? Do people really look forward to coming to work? Does it energize them or de-energize them? And are we aligned in our goals? So if you look at the matrix here, if we know what we want and we know how we're going to do it, that gives us high performance. But if we don't know what we want, or we don't know how we get, or we don't know how we're going to get there, you can see that it leads to these other issues where basically, if for example, if we know what we want, but we don't know how we're going to get there, then we get different competing sub-teams. Understanding these systems within the team is a critical part of effective team coaching and indeed team management. And the external processes. So how can we really, really listen to our stakeholders and influencers? So a stakeholder is somebody who is affected by what you do, and an influencer is somebody who influences what you can do, so provides the resources. What about our social processes? How do we talk about our stakeholders? Is it with respect, or is it something else? And then if we look at this from a systems points perspective, ourselves, our team, and the team around us. So you've got the internal dynamics, what goes on inside the team, and there are diagnostics out there which purport, and I do say purport rather than to actually do this, to understand what goes in the team. The Lencioni 5 dysfunctions of a team purports to be claims to be about team performance, but of course, as you will have noted in some of the previous slides, doesn't take into account whatsoever the influence of external factors and the chain of cause and effect that it claims is just manifestly untrue in many cases. So you've got some sort of pop science, pseudoscience here around internal dynamics of teams. But understanding those internal dynamics is really important. So is understanding the external dynamics. What's going on between our stakeholders? What are the pressures that they are under right now? And how will they affect their relationship with us? And the patterns of relationship of dynamics across the boundary between the team and its stakeholders and influencers. What's going on here when the two systems collide with each other? And so bearing in mind all of these is important to understand the team. And when we deal with relationships, how are we going to build better trust? Do we need to collaborate all the time? how I'm helping a sales team where everybody has their own individual targets to become more effective. And the key question is, how do we actually create the situation where it's really valuable to collaborate and be supportive of your colleagues? Well, we can find ways of doing this, and indeed then you can find new forms of collaboration. And I love this question: how can team members become accountable for each other's well-being, development, and performance? Teams that are truly diverse and truly agile have to take this joint responsibility for well-being, development, and performance, not just yourself, but your colleagues. And how do we make diversity of performance enhancer rather than drag on performance? And then the internal processes. What's our internal narrative? Does it actually help us or hinder us? We really want change. And all these, when we're making decisions, do we actually really question whether or not, go back and question those decisions later? So the sunk cost trap is where, if you go into the casino and you put money into the slot machine and you run out of money, do you actually go and get a lot of more money? Well, it's going to pay out soon. I put all that money in. I've got to put some more in. Or do you say, okay, let's call it quits? And so often we put more and more resources in teams into things that never worked, are never going to work, and simply divert our attention from things that are much more important. And then the learning, how do we learn? What helps and hinders our learning? Different types of team have different types of learning. So how are we adjusting to the type of team we are? Can we get more and more learning happening? And biggest question, are we evolving and learning as fast as the world around us needs us to? And then teams, team leaderships, how do we get the leaders we need? How do we support weak leaders, especially if the team leader is the team's main problem? And how do we actually work with distributed teams, or distributed leadership rather? These are all questions which are fundamental to thinking about leadership in a team. So we call it the PERILL model, and we use it for discovery interviews at the beginning to try and understand the team, as an online diagnostic, and as a workshop framework, so people map real issues that have happened within the team, successes and failures. And you can use the PERILL model at any stage through the team coaching process. So we start off with discovery. So what do we need to know about this team, and what does the team need to know about itself? We then contract as to what we're going to be able to do and how we're going to be able to work together. And the team contract with each other. And then we begin to learn together, and gradually we withdraw as the team learns to coach itself. And then we evaluate what changed for the team, how future fit is the team now compared to where we started. And if you want to read more about this, the second edition of Coaching the Team at Work came out last year. It's to my knowledge, the only complex adaptive systems approach to team coaching at the moment. And it has lots and lots of case studies and examples of how to put all this into practice in your teams. So all I can leave that and say is your thoughts and questions. Thank you for listening to me. I'm going to stop the share.
Thank you, Dr. David. Let's get some questions here. It's time for questions now. Okay, we can actually receive your questions in the chat box, or if you would like to talk, please go on.
Thanks, David, for your session. This is Ajit here. How do we have a buy-in from the leadership for the team coaching?
The simple question is, which teams in your organization can you not afford to fail?
Yeah. I mean, that goes philosophical. Honestly, I have had this challenge where I came up with very much the ideas of a high performing team and a model very similar to this. But when I went to the leadership, they said, you know what, we have timelines, we have budget constraints, we have invoices pending, you got to deliver it. Doesn't matter you coach the team or you make them work. And that's where it becomes very, very difficult to put that coaching in place. And there seems to be an urgent need to have some formula when we can have a buy-in first with the leadership and then focus back on the team coaching? If anything that you
Yeah,
can share to me.
I think when the team leaders or the organization leaders are so short-sighted, there's not very much you can do, except if it's a publicly quoted company. I have said, if I had any shares, I think I'd be selling them right now.
Dr. Claire, do you have a question? Dr. Claire?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi there, Mahmoud. Great to see you, and great to see you there, David.
Hi, Claire.
So I'm in the middle of creating a team coaching readiness survey to see how, because team coaching in the Middle East is, especially systemic team coaching, and the more complex way of dealing with the whole system, internal and externals, in its infancy, really. Is there anything out there already in terms of team coaching readiness, especially in terms of internal coaches in large organizations, as a way to decide which teams to coach?
I don't think there's a reliable instrument there. I think that there is a need for one. I'm just very quickly looking on my computer to see if I've got anything that you see. I've got a questionnaire somewhere. There we go. How ready is this team for coaching? And it's got 20 items on it. So it items like, do the team members have positive expectations of coaching generally? Are they committed to open, honest dialogue? Are they willing to challenge themselves and each other? So I will send this to you, Claire, separately.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Would you mind sharing that out to the group as a whole? Because I think a lot of us could benefit from that.
I think we could do that. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Dr. Magid Al-Safa. Dr. Magid, you have a question?
Thank you, Dr. David, for this amazing session. But I need to ask how to use team coaching in government sector, especially schools, education ministry. We have a different cultures, and how to matching all these cultures in the same way, the same strategy, the same roadmap.
I'm trying to work out quite what the question was. But can we actually use team coaching in schools and government departments? Is that the question?
Yeah. I think we face a challenge in government sector versus private sector. In government sectors, not perceiving all tools, how to use team coaching in government sector.
Okay. Interestingly, in the United Kingdom, for example, one of the most enthusiastic adopters of team coaching have been the public sector, and so, for example, I've run large programs in the National Health Service, in the Air Force, and other organizations. So there's a very strong understanding that teaming and a team culture is essential for being able to basically pare down the numbers of people in an organization, but still produce more results. I think any organization that's in those circumstances needs team coaching. And that's another way of asking the question: could you achieve twice as much with half the people without just relying on technology? It depends how important that is to the leaders of an organization. I have a special interest with the school sector because later this year, all being well, we'll launch a foundation to create 5 million school-age coaches and mentors globally.
Wonderful. Any other questions? We have Mr. Dumi.
Hi, Dumi.
Hello, David. Good to see you. Great session. Really enjoyed it. Thanks again, Mahmoud. Appreciate this. Quick check, David, on more on a bigger scale, global scale around the profession of coaching and its growth and evolution. Is there something that you picked up in your research and your writing and your experience around why there is such a demand or growth for team coaching now and not say 5-10 years ago? What are the trends that have led to this explosion? I see it now. I'm based in South Africa, in Johannesburg. There's a lot of demand for coaching. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's two things coming together. I think number one, organizations just are more and more team based. We can't do things without having teams. And you know, it's just some of the terrible data we see. That Sloan Management Review study that showed that people at the top of organizations can't even agree on what the strategic priorities for the organization that they're supposed to be leading are. You know, so when we get to that stage, people are becoming much more team aware. But also, I think for team coaches, as I started off today saying, yeah, I think basic numpty coaching at that basic, that simple grow model level is going to be obsolete very quickly. So if you're going to stay in the game, you need to be able to deliver something that is much more robust, much more complex, much more systemic. And I think probably in 5 years' time, the entry point to coaching will be very different. That it'll be more difficult to become a coach, and you'll have to do a lot more study. And if we take basically the ACC level at ICF, I don't think that in the future will be enough to qualify as a functioning coach. So I think everything is moving upstream in terms of what we see. So that raises the bar, and unless of course it may be redefined now in terms of what you do, and but we don't know how that's going to happen. But I think we've got some major upheavals happening. And I also think there's something here about, you used the word profession. I'm increasingly challenging whether coaching is a profession or is it a vocation. I get really concerned about all this stuff that I see about make more money as a coach. And I'm thinking, is that really what I joined coaching to do?
Thank you, Dr. David. We have a question from Mr. Robin.
Thanks, David. That image that you had shown about the pillars, the 5 pillars with a base of leadership, that triggers a question of, isn't team, the pillar concept of the team coaching, isn't that really something that needs to be established from the top? Meaning, is the board of directors a good team? And then going down, is the executive directors a good team? And thus going down to the more granular team. So this concept of team to me looks like a pyramid structure which defines the mood and the quality of teamwork and team coaching all over the organization. What's your reaction?
I think the challenge here is that the higher up the hierarchy you go, the more difficult it is to create a team, because there's more, the bigger egos. And when you get to a board, the whole point of being a board is that you don't go native, that you don't all have the same perception. You come with different perceptions. So you have some aspects of teaming, that you're all there for the same purpose, hopefully. But you've also got a lot of other factors, like you may be not like directors may be representative of different stakeholder groups, for example. So I think it's the complexity, the difficulty of creating real teams that's a challenge here. So it's a degree. I think if we put it a different way and say, how much teaming do we need, and can we create at each level?
Thank you, Dr. David. We have a question actually in this chat box this time. It says, is there any measurement tool reflecting how team coaching enhance the ROI for the companies?
And the answer is not yet. It's one of the things I think that we will expect to see more work done on. But there's no reliable measure of one-to-one coaching either. I mean, there are lots of things out there. Part of the problem with one-to-one coaching is whatever you decide is going to be the measure. So somebody says, I want to improve in this, so I'm going to move from a 3 to a 10. But if the coaching's any good, the goal will change anyway. So that goal's obsolete. So that measurement's obsolete. And now you've got the complexity of the team. It's much more difficult. We have been looking at this, and it's the degree to which the team is self-sufficient, is able to coach itself. Now, we haven't got a clear measure of that, except for self-assessment, which is not a great measure in any from an academic perspective. It might be fine from an organization's perspective, but as somebody who's a pracademic, sort of practitioner and academic, I can see it from both sides. And the academic side would not accept self-report as good enough. So I think at the moment we're still, that is a work in progress.
Thank you. We have a question also from Mrs. Sylvie.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you, David. It was a very, very mind-blowing and interesting session. But the question I want to ask you this afternoon is, what is the most important quality a team coaching executive should have? The most important,
coach, yeah.
Yeah.
So
for you to go into,
yeah.
yes.
I think there are several key qualities. One is humility.
Okay.
And that comes across coaching across the board.
Okay.
The other is the ability to experiment and constantly. I'm a great exponent of improv.
Okay.
Yeah, because when you are team coaching, it's the closest analogy that I can give is being an improv artist. You don't know what's going to happen. You're working with an audience, with the team. You want them to experiment with things. You know that half of what you're going to do isn't going to work, but then you try something else.
Okay.
So I think that ability to be in the moment, to be humble enough to allow the conversation to evolve, but to be constantly just have enough direction to allow that conversation to give the team what the insights and understanding that it needs. We don't have a word for this. Somebody will have to invent a word to describe this whole concept of supporting the emergence of understanding within the team. I mean, we've talked about calling it emergent team coaching, but even that's not strong enough. So we're looking for a word to describe this.
Thank you. We have another question from Mr. Eddie.
Hi, Eddie.
All right. Thank you, David. This is mind-blowing, and I appreciate the presentation. I have just two little questions. I don't know if they are actually related, but let me just put them out. We are seeing that the workspace is changing. There is constant change, and people work remotely most of the time. At what point do we see team coaching becoming relevant with people working remotely? That's on one part. And then the other side of the question is team coaching also required in the setting outside of the executive workspace? Yeah.
Okay, so team coaching can be applied anywhere in the organization. One of the best places to apply it, or most effective places, is new project teams. helping them to move from all this nonsense about forming, storming, norming to performing. Nobody's got time for that rubbish anymore. We basically have to go straight to performing. So how do we do that? And team coaching is a really strong vehicle for making that happen. And in terms of virtual, yes, we're all working virtually now. And so there are different tools and techniques. So one of the things, for example, is how do we actually monitor the whole room? So I can only see a number of faces I can see 30 faces on my screen. But it's important that the team size is kept down so that you can actually see everybody and react to what's happening for everybody. And most importantly, to listen to everybody. Because actually, what research tells us is if we listen, we intuit a lot more than if we observe facial expressions.
Thank you. We have another.
Thank you,
Mr.
Okay, I've got to be on another webinar shortly, so yeah.
Okay, this is the last question we'll take. Mr. Christian, please.
Thank you. Hello, David. Good to see you again.
Hello.
I have one question that is related to the question from Dr. Majid, who spoke of how to incubate that in a government institution. How do you build the case for change to actually convince the management? And how do you build that case for change to also integrate this into the institutional culture?
I think, as I said earlier, this which teams can you not afford to fail we start with that. But I would always start small. We find that the majority of team coaching assignments start off not with somebody in the top level saying, please, can you come in and sort out some of our teams? But they start with working with an individual leader within an organization at any level, and that leader then asking you to come and do some work with their team. And that establishes the reputation. And once you've got that, once people see the change in that team, that's where team coaches begin then to be able to offer the resources elsewhere. We are seeing a significant increase in some parts of the world, particularly in the UK and Europe, relating to building internal team coach capability.
Thank you, David. And what's the right team size? You said keep it small. You mentioned also the number 5, I heard. So 5 to 8, is that?
Yeah, but basically it all goes back to some experiments over 100 years ago, where they put some very strong farm lads at either end of a tug of war rope, and measured the amount of energy they put in. And when there was only one person at either end, you got X amount of energy divided by 2. So that was the amount of energy each person was putting in, or the amount of effort. Then they had 2 people, and the amount of energy went up because you felt supported. And then 3, it went up a bit more, and then gradually different results. But by the time you got to 8, after 8, the amount of energy that each person put in, or the amount of effort that each person put in, diminished dramatically. And that was because basically everybody assumed everybody else was taking up the slack. And we see this work in organizations of all sizes, all over the world, in all cultures. People have this phenomenon when you get above that 5 to 8 is you are on the cusp of seeing people just take it a bit easy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. David, and thanks for everyone for attending this presentation. And see you next Tuesday with CTA Transformational Tuesdays. Thank you so much, and see you next Tuesday.
Thank you, everybody, and I'll send that questionnaire on.
Okay, thank you, Dr. David. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.